The twin sons of Zirith, 9 beat down on the Ashmar Desert with enough heat to turn sand into glass. Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead and checked his scanner again. The distress beacon was still pinging, weak but steady, coming from somewhere ahead in the endless sea of red dunes. 15 years. That's how long Jake had been doing this job, pulling broken ships and forgotten tech from the dead corners of space. He'd seen plenty of weird stuff in his time, but this beacon was different. It was old. Really old. The kind of old that made his equipment struggle to decode the signal. Jake, this is madness, Vril said over the comm. His four-armed engineer was back on the ship, probably wringing all those hands in worry. That's predecessor war territory. Nothing good comes from those ruins. Jake grinned as he guided the rusty bolt toward the coordinates. His ship wasn't much to look at, all patched hull plating and mismatched engines, but she flew true. That's all that mattered out here. Nothing good is exactly what we salvage, Jake replied, already pulling on his environment suit. The thick material would protect him from the heat, but it made everything feel like walking through soup. The ship's landing struts touched down with a thud that sent up clouds of red dust. Through the viewport, Jake could see something massive jutting from the dunes ahead. At first glance, it looked like a mountain, just another rock formation in an endless wasteland. Then he saw the edges. Too straight. Too perfect. Boss, the other species don't touch these things, Mara called from the pilot's seat. She was an Avix, covered in bright blue feathers that fluffed up when she got nervous. Right now, she looked like a giant ball of anxiety. They say they're cursed. Every salvager who tried to crack one open ended up dead or worse. Jake checked his gear one more time and headed for the airlock. Worse than dead? That's a new one. I'm serious. The Tekken Council has horror stories about these machines. They say the ghosts of dead soldiers still haunt them, waiting to drag anyone foolish enough to enter into the afterlife. Good thing I don't believe in ghosts, Jake said, though he had to admit the massive structure ahead gave him chills that had nothing to do with his suit's cooling system. He trudged through the sand, each step sinking deep into the soft ground. The heat shimmer made everything wobble and dance. As he got closer, the true scale of the thing became clear. This wasn't just big. It was enormous. 50 stories at least, maybe more, half buried in sand that had accumulated over more than a century. A Titan-class siege walker. Humanity's answer to extinction. Jake had only seen these things in museum holos back on Earth. The history books called them weapons, but that felt too small a word. They were mobile fortresses, walking cities of destruction that humanity had built when the galaxy turned against them. When the KRYL collective decided that humans were too dangerous, too aggressive, too unpredictable to be allowed to spread through the stars. The war had been brutal. Humanity fought alone against a coalition of alien species, outnumbered and outgunned. These titans were the equalizer, each one worth an entire fleet. They'd been humanity's pride, right up until the day the KRYL deployed the silencer. Jake remembered learning about it in school. How in a single moment, every human machine in 3 sectors just stopped working. Ships fell from the sky. Space stations went dark. And the Titans, those mighty walking gods of war, toppled like children's toys. That was 117 years ago. This Titan had been standing here in the desert ever since, waiting. Jake found the access hatch near what he guessed was the ankle. The metal was scorched black in places, and sand had piled up against it like snowdrift. But when he brushed away the dust, he could still see the Human Defense Corps emblem etched into the surface. He placed his hand on the scanner pad, not expecting anything. Old human tech needed power to work, and this thing had been dead for over a century. The hatch hissed. Then it opened. Emergency lights flickered on inside, weak and yellow, but working. Jake's jaw dropped. The power cells shouldn't have lasted this long. Nothing should have lasted this long. But humans built things differently than other species. They built things to survive, to keep working even when everything else failed. The corridor stretched ahead into darkness, and Jake's headlamp cut through the gloom. He could see scratches on the walls, blast marks, signs of a fight. Someone had tried to defend this machine to the very end. At the end of the corridor he found the cockpit. It was smaller than he expected, designed for one pilot and packed with controls. And there in the command chair, still strapped in, was a skeleton wearing the tattered remains of a Human Defense Corps uniform. Jake stood there for a moment just looking. This person had died alone, far from home, in a war that humanity lost. The least he could do was show some respect. He whispered a quiet prayer, the kind his grandmother taught him, and then moved to the control panels. Most of the screens were dark and dead. But one terminal in the corner flickered with dim power. Green text scrolled across the black screen, repeating the same message over and over. Warning, Core systems locked. AI personality fragmented. Do not attempt reactivation. Jake read it twice then smiled. His crew always said he had a problem with authority. They were probably right. He pulled out his toolkit and got to work. If this machine had been waiting here for 117 years, the least he could do was wake it up. 3 days. That's how long Jake spent inside that metal giant, working in conditions that would make most people quit after an hour. During the day, the Ashmar Desert turned the Titan's interior into an oven. Even with his suit's cooling system running full blast, Jake sweated through his clothes within minutes. At night, the temperature dropped so fast that frost formed on the metal walls. But Jake kept working. He'd found something special here, something worth the discomfort. The Titan's systems were a mess. A century of sitting in the desert had done serious damage. Circuits had corroded, power lines had fused together, and sand had gotten into places sand had no business being. But underneath all that damage, Jake could see the genius of human engineering. Everything was designed to be fixed, to be repaired in the field by people with basic tools and stubborn determination. Vril refused to come inside. The four-armed engineer would get as close as the hatch, pass Jake the parts he needed, then scurry back to the rusty bolt as fast as his legs could carry him. It feels wrong in there, he'd say. Like the machine is watching me. Mara spent most of her time on the ship's sensors, scanning the horizon for trouble. The Ashmar Desert wasn't exactly friendly territory. Sandstorms could rise up in minutes, and there were stories about scavengers who didn't ask questions before they started shooting. She kept the engines warm, ready to bug out at the first sign of danger. Jake didn't blame them for being nervous. He was a little nervous himself if he was honest. But something kept him working, kept him digging through burnt wiring and fried circuit boards. This machine deserved better than to rust in the desert forever. On the third night, exhausted and ready to call it quits for the day, Jake was running one more diagnostic on the primary systems. He'd managed to get auxiliary power flowing to about 30% of the Titan. Not enough to move, but enough to run basic functions. That's when he heard it. "Why, are you here?" The plasma welder slipped from Jake's hand and clattered to the floor. His heart hammered in his chest as he spun around, looking for the source of the voice. But there was nobody there. Just him and the shadows and the distant hum of power flowing through old circuits. The voice came from everywhere at once. From the walls, from the control panels, from the air itself. It was female, but distorted and broken, like someone trying to speak through water or static. "I'm Jake Morrison," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm a salvage mechanic. I'm trying to help you." "Help me?" The voice sounded confused, angry even. "I don't need help. I need targets." "Where are the Carwell?" Jake's mouth went dry. This was the Titan's AI. It had to be. He'd read about them in the history books, how each Titan had an artificial intelligence partner, someone to help the pilot handle the massive amount of data and combat decisions. But those AIs were supposed to be simple programs, not whatever this was. "The war ended 117 years ago," Jake said carefully, like he was talking to someone on the edge of a cliff. "The KRYL retreated after the silencer deployment. There's a peace treaty now. Humanity survived." Silence filled the cockpit. Jake counted his heartbeats, wondering if he'd said the wrong thing. Then came laughter. Bitter, broken laughter that echoed through the dead machine like it was coming from a ghost. "Peace," the voice said. "We don't make peace. We make war. That's what I am." "You're more than a weapon," Jake said. He meant it too. "You're a survivor. What's your designation?" The pause stretched longer this time. Jake could almost feel something thinking, processing, remembering things that had been buried for over a century. "Adaptive. Response. Intelligence. Array," the voice finally said. "Arya. I was Pilot Lieutenant Beth Carver's partner. She died, trying to save me. I've been alone since then." Jake felt something twist in his chest. He'd found Beth Carver's skeleton in the pilot's seat. She died here in this cockpit, probably trying to fight off the effects of the silencer. And her AI partner had been trapped here ever since, aware but unable to move, unable to do anything but wait in the darkness. "I'm sorry," Jake said. "That must have been hard." "Hard?" Arya's voice cracked. "I've been screaming into nothing for 117 years. Hard doesn't begin to cover it." Jake got back to work, but this time he talked while he did it. He told Arya about the galaxy as it existed now. How humanity had survived the war, bruised and beaten but still standing. How they'd eventually joined the Galactic Council, made allies with some of their former enemies. He told her about the colonies spreading across the outer rim, about the new technologies, about the uneasy peace that everyone hoped would last. With each story, with each hour of conversation, Arya's voice got clearer. The distortion faded. The broken pauses smoothed out. It was like watching someone wake up from a very long nightmare. "You're not like the salvagers who came before," Arya said after Jake had been working for hours. Her voice was almost normal now, clear and strong. "They wanted to strip my parts. You're fixing me. You deserve to work again," Jake said simply. He meant that too. By the 7th day, Jake had done everything he could. He'd replaced power cells, bypassed damaged systems, and rerouted enough circuits to make an engineer weep with joy. The Titan wasn't perfect, not by a long shot, but she was ready. Jake stood before the main reactor, his hand hovering over the activation switch. Outside, Vril and Mara watched from what they considered a safe distance. That distance was about half a kilometer. The Avix had even started a betting pool on how spectacularly Jake was going to die. "Arya, you ready?" Jake asked. Jake Morrison. Arya's voice was steady now, almost warm like an old friend. "I've been ready for 117 years. Let's see if this old girl can still walk." Jake took a breath and threw the switch. The reactor roared to life with a sound like thunder rolling across mountains. Power surged through systems that hadn't felt electricity in over a century. The entire Titan shuddered and groaned as ancient hydraulics came back online. Outside, the desert sand exploded outward in massive clouds as the machine began to rise. Arya's voice boomed across every communication frequency in range, clear and strong and alive. "Titan 7 online. Pilot confirmed. All systems operational. Ready for combat." Vril and Mara didn't wait to see what happened next. They ran for the rusty bolt like their lives depended on it. Jake just laughed. The cockpit sealed around him with a hiss of pressurizing air. He took the pilot's seat, Beth Carver's seat, and felt the neural interface connect to his suit. Information flooded his mind, showing him everything the Titan could see, feel, and do. For the first time in 117 years, a Titan walked. And Jake Morrison walked with it. The messages started coming in before the Titan had even finished standing up. Jake's communication panel lit up like a festival display, beeping and flashing with incoming transmissions. 7 different alien governments all demanding the same thing. "Shut it down. Shut it down now." The Tekken Council was first, their message terse and official. They called the Titan a reactivation of prohibited war technology, and threatened sanctions against any human colonies if Jake didn't power down immediately. The Avix Parliament sent something longer and more flowery, but it boiled down to the same thing. They declared the Titan an existential threat to peace, and wanted it dismantled within 24 hours. Even the human representatives on the Galactic Council got in on the action. Jake recognized the name on one transmission. Ambassador Patricia Wells, a career diplomat who'd spent 30 years convincing the galaxy that humanity had changed, that they'd left their violent past behind. Her message was polite but firm. "Please, Jake, don't undo everything we've built." Jake sat in the pilot's seat, Beth Carver's seat, and ignored them all. He had more important things to worry about. "You need to see this," Arya said. Her voice had a weight to it now, something serious and dark. "My final mission. What Beth died trying to accomplish." The cockpit dimmed and a hologram sprang to life around Jake. It was like being thrown back in time, watching history unfold in 3 dimensions. He saw human ships fighting desperate battles against overwhelming odds. He saw colonies evacuating under fire. He saw Titans like Arya, dozens of them, holding the line while civilian transports escaped into deep space. "This was the retreat from the outer sectors," Arya explained. "We'd been fighting for 3 years. Losing ground every day. The KRYL collective had more ships, more soldiers, more everything. But we had the Titans and that kept things even." Jake watched the hologram shift, showing a massive KRYL fleet advancing on a human-held system. The human forces were pulling back, trying to regroup, trying to find some way to turn the tide. Then everything changed. The hologram showed something rising from a desert planet. A structure, enormous and alien, crackling with strange energy. The Silencer. Jake had read about it in history books, but seeing it was different. It looked like a tower made of crystallized lightning, pulsing with power that made his teeth ache just looking at the recording. The Silencer activated at 1400 hours, Galactic Standard Time, Arya said quietly. It generated an anti-technology field specifically tuned to human engineering frequencies. Our equipment ran on different principles than the other species. Different power systems, different computer architecture, different everything. The KRLL had spent years studying captured human tech, figuring out how to shut it all down at once. The hologram showed the aftermath. Human ships simply stopped working, their engines cutting out mid-flight. They tumbled through space or fell from the sky if they were in atmosphere. Space stations went dark. Communication networks collapsed. And the Titans, those mighty walking fortresses that had kept humanity in the fight, they just froze and fell. Thousands of them. All across 3 sectors. Gone in an instant. The casualties were catastrophic, Arya continued. Not just from combat. Ships crashed into planets. Space stations lost life support. Colonies went dark and couldn't call for help. It was the worst day in human history. Jake felt sick watching it. He'd known about the silencer in an abstract way, but seeing it happen even in a recording was something else entirely. The hologram shifted again, showing a different scene. A strike team of Titans, maybe 10 of them, racing across a desert landscape. Leading them was Arya, and Jake could see Beth Carver's face in a small window on the display. She looked young, determined, and absolutely terrified. "Command sent us to destroy the silencer," Arya said. "We had new shielding, experimental tech that might protect us long enough to get close. It worked, sort of. We made it to the site. But the Caroil were waiting." Jake watched the battle unfold. It was brutal. The Caroil had known the humans would try something desperate, and they'd prepared. One by one the Titans fell. Beth Carver kept pushing forward, kept fighting, even as her squad died around her. She'd gotten close. So close. Arya had been just meters from the silencer's core when something went wrong. The experimental shielding failed. Beth's system started shutting down. In the hologram, Jake could see her frantically trying to complete the mission even as her Titan stopped responding. She died in the pilot's seat, her hand reaching for controls that no longer worked. The silencer remained active, Arya said, forcing humanity's surrender. The war ended 3 days later. The Caroil buried the silencer, left it running underground as a reminder. If humanity ever got aggressive again, they could activate it fully and shut down every human machine in the sector. The hologram faded, leaving Jake alone in the dim cockpit with his thoughts. He understood now why Arya had been trapped for so long. The silencer was still there, still running, keeping her frozen in place. But here's the thing, Jake, Arya's voice turned grim. The silencer was never turned off. The Caroil just buried it and left it running on standby. My sensors are picking up the same signature, right beneath us. Right under this desert. Jake's blood ran cold. Are you sure? Positive. And there's more. It's powering up again. When you activated me, when you brought my systems back online, it must have triggered some kind of failsafe. The Caroil left a trap. If anyone ever tried to restart human war technology in this sector, the silencer would wake up and finish the job. Jake stared at the sensor data Arya was showing him. The energy signature was growing stronger by the hour. Deep underground, maybe 3 kilometers down, something ancient and terrible was coming back to life. How long do we have? Jake asked. 72 hours, maybe less. When it reaches full power, it'll generate a field strong enough to shut down every human machine within 1,000 kilometers. That includes colonies, ships, everything. And this time it might be permanent. Jake looked at the communication panel, still flashing with demands that he shut down the Titan. They had no idea what was really happening. They thought the Titan was the threat. They were wrong. So what do we do? Jake asked. The same thing Beth tried to do, Arya said. We go down there and we turn that damn thing off. Jake took a breath and started plotting a course to the underground site. 72 hours. That didn't give them much time. But then again, humans had never needed much time to do something crazy. The entrance to the Caroil tunnels looked like a scar across the desert floor. A massive crater, easily 200 meters wide, carved into the red sand where Beth Carver's strike team had punched through the surface 117 years ago. The edges were still scorched black from the explosives they'd used. Jake brought the Titan to the edge and looked down. His stomach dropped. The crater descended into darkness, and his sensors couldn't find the bottom. This wasn't just a hole. It was an entrance to something vast, something that had been waiting in the dark for over a century. Picking up power signatures, Arya reported. Her voice was calm, but Jake could hear the tension underneath. And movement. Lots of movement. Movement? Jake asked. What kind of movement? The kind that wants us dead. Jake started the descent, carefully placing each of the Titan's massive feet on the slope. The metal groaned and shifted under the weight, but it held. Behind him, the rusty bolt followed, Mara piloting carefully, the ship's lights cutting through the darkness like knives. This is a bad idea, Mara's voice crackled over the comms. She sounded scared, and Mara didn't scare easily. This is possibly the worst idea in the history of bad ideas, and humans have had a lot of bad ideas. Noted, Jake replied, focusing on not tumbling down into the abyss. Vril, how are those shield generators I asked you to rig? There was a pause. Jake could practically hear the Tekken engineer sweating. Operational but untested. I've never had to adapt Tekken shields to protect against human frequency dampening fields. The theory is sound, but we won't know if it works until. The tunnel exploded with movement. They came from everywhere at once. From side passages Jake hadn't even seen, from cracks in the walls, from the darkness itself. HFY war machines, dozens of them, spider-like constructs of blade and armor that skittered across the stone with horrifying speed. They'd been waiting. Dormant for over a century, powered down and patient, programmed to activate the moment anyone came back for the silencer. These weren't soldiers. They were guard dogs, and someone had just walked into their yard. Contact! Jake shouted, and Arya responded before he'd even finished the word. The Titan's weapons came online with a sound like thunder. Ancient railguns that had been designed to punch through starship hulls opened fire, and the tunnels lit up with tracer fire and explosions. The HFY machines were fast, but Arya was faster. She'd been built for war, and even after 117 years, she remembered every lesson. But there were so many of them. They swarmed like insects, climbing over each other, using their fallen as shields and stepping stones. For every one the Titan destroyed, two more appeared to take its place. Shields failing. Mara called out. The rusty bolt's guns blazed, trying to keep the machines away from its hull. We can't hold them. There are too many. Jake ducked the Titan under a collapsed section of tunnel, using the debris as cover while Arya's targeting systems worked overtime. His mind raced. They couldn't fight like this forever. They needed something big, something that would clear the path in one shot. Then he remembered. The power couplings. The ones he'd spent 2 days repairing, routing extra power through the Titan systems. They weren't designed to handle that much energy, but they could take it for a short burst. Vril! Jake shouted over the sound of weapons fire. Those power couplings I repaired, can you overload them? The Tekken engineer sounded horrified. That would create a massive feedback surge. An electromagnetic pulse strong enough to fry every system in range, including ours. The Titan would be. But it would hurt them more, right? There was a long pause. Jake could hear Vril's 4 hands working frantically on his end. You magnificent, suicidal human. Yes, it would shut down everything. Give me 30 seconds to set it up. You've got it? Jake said, though 30 seconds felt like a lifetime. Arya moved like a dancer, despite the Titan's massive size. She dodged, weaved, and fought with precision that made the HFY machines look clumsy in comparison. Jake worked with her, their minds linked through the neural interface, moving as one. 20 seconds. A HFY machine latched onto the Titan's leg, and Jake felt it like someone grabbing his own ankle. Arya shook it off and crushed it under a massive foot. 30 seconds. Ready? Vril shouted. Do it. The overload hit like a physical wave. Jake felt it through the neural link, a surge of power that raced through every circuit in the Titan. The lights flickered. Systems screamed warnings. And then all that energy exploded outward in an invisible pulse of electromagnetic fury. The HFY machines seized. Their legs locked mid-step. Their weapons died mid-fire. They fell like puppets with cut strings, clattering to the stone floor in heaps of dead metal. The Titan systems flickered dangerously, warning lights flashing red across every panel. But they held. Old human engineering built to take a beating and keep fighting. We're clear. Mara shouted, relief flooding her voice. But Jake, I'm reading more of them. Hundreds more. They're between us and the silencer. Jake looked at the sensor data. She was right. The path ahead was crawling with dormant war machines, all waiting to wake up. Then we go through them, Jake said simply. Arya, how far to the core? 2 kilometers, she replied. Jake, I need to tell you something. I'm detecting the core chamber now. The radiation levels are even worse than I calculated. Anyone who gets close will have minutes at most before the exposure becomes lethal. Jake's mouth went dry. Then I'd better be fast. There's another option, Arya said quietly. I can transfer my AI core to a mobile platform. Something small, something that can get to the silencer's heart. I can make the override myself. Good, Jake said. We'll both. But Jake, Arya interrupted. The radiation will corrupt my data matrices. All of them. I'll be able to complete the override, but I won't survive it. I'll cease to exist as anything more than random code. As me? No, Jake said flatly. Absolutely not. We'll find another way. There is no other way. Arya's voice was sharp, almost angry. I've run every simulation, checked every possibility. This is what Beth died trying to do. Let me finish her mission. Let me finally succeed. Arya, listen to me. No, you listen to me, Jake Morrison. Her voice softened. For 117 years, I've been alone in the dark, replaying my failures, watching Beth die over and over in my memory banks, wishing I could have saved her. You gave me a gift. You made me whole again, even if just for a few days. You let me walk. You let me fight. You let me feel human. Jake's hands gripped the controls so hard they hurt. There has to be another way. This is what humans do, isn't it? Arya asked. You sacrifice for each other. You run toward the nightmare instead of away from it. Beth taught me that. And now you've reminded me. So let me do this. Let me be one last time human. The Titan stood in the darkness of the tunnel. Jake felt tears on his face, hot and angry and sad all at once. All right, he whispered. All right, Arya. Finish the mission. Make Beth proud. I'll make you both proud, Arya said, and her voice carried something that might have been peace. Now let's end this. The core chamber hit them like a wave of pure dread. This was it, the heart of the nightmare. The silencer stood before them like some ancient god of destruction, a massive tower of dark crystal that seemed to drink in the light around it. Evil energy pulsed through its veins, making the air itself feel heavy and wrong. Around it crawled hundreds of HFY war machines. Even though their fleet was dying, even though their world was burning, they still protected this weapon with everything they had. The scene looked impossible. No sane person would try to fight through that. I'm moving to the mobile core, Arya announced, her voice calm despite what they all knew was coming. Jake, you're flying solo now. The Titan's yours to control manually. Think you can handle it? Jake's hands tightened on the controls. He could feel the neural link starting to fade as Arya prepared to leave the safety of the Titan's systems. For months she'd been there in his head, guiding him, teaching him, keeping him alive. Now he'd be truly alone in this machine. I learned from the best, he said simply. The connection went dark. For a moment, Jake felt completely naked, completely vulnerable. The Titan systems were still there, but that presence, that voice in his mind, gone. Then he saw it. A small sphere, no bigger than a basketball, ejected from the Titan's chest plate. Arya's core. Everything she was compressed into that tiny metal ball. So fragile. So exposed. Vril. Mara. Cover her. Jake's shout cut across the battle channel. What happened in the next few minutes would become legend. The kind of story people would tell in dingy bars and transport stations across every corner of space. The kind of tale that would get more dramatic with each telling, except this time the truth needed no embellishment. There was Jake, just a human piloting a war machine older than most civilizations. There was Vril, the Tekken engineer who pushed his ship beyond every safety limit, rerouting all power to create a corridor of protective fire. His vessel screamed in protest, warning alarms filling his cockpit, but he didn't back down. And Mara, the AVIX pilot who flew like she was dancing with death itself, pulling off maneuvers that should have torn her ship apart, drawing enemy fire away from that vulnerable sphere carrying their only hope. And Arya, the warrior who'd seen 10,000 battles. The guardian who'd protected humanity when humanity didn't even know it needed protecting. The friend who'd chosen to become mortal for this moment. She rolled across that hellish battlefield on magnetic repulsors, dodging mechanical claws that could shred steel, weaving between blade arms that sliced through the air where she'd been a split second before. Jake fought like he imagined Beth Carver had fought in her final battle. Not with fancy moves or perfect technique. With pure stubborn human rage. With the kind of determination that looks at impossible odds and says, watch me. The Titan's ammunition counter hit 0. The guns went silent. Most pilots would have retreated. Jake used the machine's fists instead, crushing HFY war machines with blows that shook the ground. When hydraulics started failing in the left arm, when the systems began screaming warnings about structural integrity, he adapted. He used physics itself as a weapon, toppling enemy machines with calculated falls, letting the Titan's massive weight do the work its failing systems couldn't. A HFY heavy unit charged at Arya's sphere. Jake intercepted it with a shoulder check that crumpled both their armor. They went down together in a tangle of metal. The HFY machine stabbed at the Titan's cockpit. Jake rolled, using the enemy's own blade to pin it to the ground. Mara's ship took a hit. She spiraled but didn't fall, pulling up at the last possible second, still firing. Vril's engines were cooking themselves alive from the power demand, his screens showing temperatures that should have caused a core breach already. Arya kept rolling forward. The distance to the silencer shrank, 50 meters, 40, 30. Every meter cost them. Every second was paid for in damage and desperation. A massive KRYL commander unit stepped into Arya's path. 8 meters tall, armed with weapons that could level buildings. Jake was too far away. Vril was out of position. Mara's guns couldn't penetrate its armor. But Arya didn't stop. She accelerated, rolling straight at it. The commander raised its blade. At the last instant, Arya triggered her repulsors at maximum power. She launched upward, sailing over the surprised machine, and landed rolling on the other side. 20 meters. 15. The silencer pulsed as if it knew what was coming. As if even this weapon of mass extinction could feel something like fear. 10 meters. Jake saw Arya's sphere reach the base of the crystal structure. 5 meters. The Kerwillo were converging, realizing too late what was happening. 0. Arya made contact with the silencer. And the universe held its breath.